We are so strong.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Soul Strong podcast. And it's actually welcome to our very last deep dive for 2025. I don't know how you're landing in December, but if you feel tired, if you feel stretched thin, or maybe a little crispy around the edges, you are not alone. I am feeling all the feels too. The end of the year fatigue, the emotional load, the shifting season that we're in as a family, because we are about to move house. Oh my Lord, help me Jesus. Moving is no joke. And for years when friends or family would move, I would say things like, can I give you money? I know it's so terrible. I'm a terrible person, but I just hate moving so much. And now it's our turn. And we've actually been living in this house for nearly 7 years. So we're quite settled. And why are we moving in such a crazy season already? It's just the way that the cookie crumbled. And as we are moving, we are thinking about the reset that we're going to have with our environment and our rhythms. And it honestly feels like everything is happening all at once. So when I say I understand burnout, I really do. Some of you know parts of my story, but over a decade ago, I walked through a burnout season that really knocked me out. So I was on the road. I was traveling full-time in a music ministry. I was the road manager, and I had an episode, should we call it, one night where I started to have what I would later find out was a panic attack. But this I had never experienced before, so it was all really new to me. So I had all the sensations of like my breathing was just really difficult, and I'd lose my fingers, kind of went numb. I was obviously having massive headaches and crying excessively. And after hours of this happening, my body was just so exhausted that I eventually fell asleep. The next day, they took me to the hospital, my team, and they told me that I had had a panic attack and that I was suffering with anxiety. And at the time, I had no idea what that was. I had never even heard of someone going through anxiety. I might have heard of people having a panic attack, but I never really knew what it was. And then I had to take time off the road because it was all too much for me. And I finally got back home and I saw my GP, and he said to me, Priscila, this isn't going to kill you. And I'm actually really grateful for those words, because it was like a reset for me. That was like okay, I'm not going to die from this. Because when your body goes through something that you don't understand, it's really hard to see what the journey is supposed to look like. And so after that, I did a deep dive into just some things that have become really important resolutions in my life to this day, all these years later. And one of them was that I studied the Bible like crazy around stress and burnout and anxiety, and discovered that there were so many people in the Bible that also experienced these things. And I learned a lot of lessons. I loved that there was an ability to resonate with their stories now. There was a different kind of understanding into some of these characters. Even though they're real people, they're not characters, but we would know them as characters of the Bible. And I also made a decision to be in church every single weekend. And it was weird because some days I would just go in late on purpose and I would leave early because I actually didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to be asked that very heavy question of, how are you? That was just too much for me at the time. And so I would just, go in late, leave early, because I needed to be what later I discovered I needed to be in a place of hope. I needed to be in a place where they were speaking about something that was better than what I was going through. I'm going to go ahead and blame the fan for blowing wind in my eyes as to why they're weeping at the moment. But obviously talking about this it just brings up the journey that I went through. And it was cool being in a place of hope. And I just really want to encourage you, if you're going through some stuff that's heavy or difficult, surround yourself with people who are going to lift your spirit. Go to church, be in places where they are talking about hope, about promise, about a greater future, about purpose. Those things are game changers in your life. Put worship music on in your car, in your home, like elevate the atmosphere around you. Those things really make a difference when you are going through some tough times. I also decided to start going on some prayer walks, and I would just walk around the neighborhood. Now, keep in mind, we were on tour at the time, so there were neighborhoods that I had never seen before. So I would just kind of look for landmarks on my walks and just pray out to God, pray whatever was going on in my heart. And I honestly think a lot of what I was saying was just nonsense. But I knew that God was making sense of all of that. And that brought comfort to me. And over time, what took the better part of 2 years, I walked through a season of this recovering, strengthening. And yeah, there were ebbs and flows. There were times when I was great, and there were times that I really, really was in a dark space. Yet all the while, I was learning things in the process. And something that my therapist always says to me is to be curious about the emotions that we go through. And I take that on because I think, okay, when something happens to me, why am I going through this? And then I would also add in something that I've learned recently is to also ask, okay, what is this teaching me? And when I look back at that time of, that season of my life, it taught me so much. And I never, ever thought that I would be grateful to go through such a hard time. But I am, because it did really solidify some things in my life that all these years later, I'm still practicing some of those things. That season also taught me that I needed a shepherd. And that brings me to what I want to talk about today. Before we finish the year, before Christmas hits full swing, before we step into 2026, I want to take us into Psalm 23. This psalm has the ability to carry us through some of the darkest valleys and the heaviest seasons. And I pray that it does that for us today. So let's walk through it together. Psalm 23 is the best known and most loved psalm in the whole Bible. There are more books, poems, sermons, and songs written about this psalm than any other. Augustine even believed that this was the psalm that carried the martyrs. Can you imagine that? But here's the thing, just because it's familiar doesn't mean that we always really understand what it's saying. Psalm 23 uses two metaphors to describe who God is to us. Firstly, we see God as a shepherd, and then we see God as a royal host. Both show deep trust and deep confidence. Both show this intimacy between the writer and Yahweh. So let's read it together. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. In the ancient world, a shepherd was a very common word, but its root meaning in Hebrew is connected to the word best friend. That's how the Passion Translation puts it. This is God portrayed as the carer, the protector, the guide, the one who stays close. And the psalmist says, I lack nothing. Or as other translations say, I always have more than enough. This is a bold statement. Okay, this is like total trust. This is like a deep surrender. He's saying, my shepherd, my very best friend, he provides everything I need. What a beautiful way to look at our Jesus as our best friend, the one that is our provider. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Now, when we hear green pastures, I think of like the New Zealand rolling hills, but that's actually not the imagery for this psalm. In Judea, pastures were sparse, they were rugged, they were rocky, and sheep only lie down when they feel totally safe. And God is saying here, you can feel safe with me. He's the one that makes us lie down. Because sometimes we actually don't choose to rest, even when we desperately need it. Next line, he leads me beside quiet waters. So these quiet waters, they represent peace and stillness, security. God leads you to rest before the next battle, because rest is actually part of preparation. Rest isn't just about escaping, but about preparing for what's coming next. He restores my soul. Now, obviously, I love this line. I love everything to do with the soul. God restores what life drains. He brings our soul back to what it was meant to be. Now, when we need to feel restored or rejuvenated, we might think of, like skincare or a spa or hanging out with our friends or worship or whatever it is. But that is self-care, which is great. But this runs deeper. This is soul care. This is what Jesus restores when the world isn't able to do that. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Now, the right path, it doesn't mean the easy path, okay? It doesn't mean the straight path or even the predictable path. It means the path of life, the one that leads you home. And God's guidance, it actually starts to reveal who he is. So we can follow him on this path because we begin to trust who he is. Now, here we get to the part of the psalm where there's a shift. We've been talking about how God restores. He makes us lie down. He's our shepherd. He's our best friend. These are beautiful things that God is. This is the truth of who he is. And as we walk into the next part, there's a shift about the valley. The imagery changes. And it says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, we go from still waters, soul restoration, to a valley covered in shadows and death. The psalmist is describing life-threatening moments, places where fear is real and the future feels uncertain. But notice that the verb says, I walk through, not stuck, not camping there, not running in panic, but a steady soul, a calm soul that trusts. I want to read to you this quote by Charles Spurgeon that he says, walking indicates no hasty flight or panic, but a quiet, calm advance. David does not run in haste, but walks with steady progress. He knows that he is safe and therefore he is serene and composed. What a beautiful indication of safety. The next line says, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a turning point of the whole psalm. God's presence eliminates fear, not because the valley disappears, but because the shepherd is in the valley with you. I must reiterate this. The valley doesn't disappear. Lord knows that would be amazing, but it doesn't. Rather, we don't fear because we know who is walking through the valley with us. When you walk through burnout or overwhelm or exhaustion, you do not walk alone. And then it says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod was for protection, a weapon against predators. The staff was for guidance, to pull a sheep back towards safety. So here we have protection plus direction, and we have discipline plus comfort. And maybe someone listening today, you need to hear this. God is defending you. He sees what you can't see. He guards what you cannot guard. The thought that God is defending me, it's really humbling and inspiring, because sometimes God has to defend us even from ourselves, from our own thinking, our own mindset, thinking that we're not good enough, we're unqualified, we're not worth the battle. But as our shepherd, whose rod and staff is there to protect and guide, He comforts us. Now the metaphor shifts from God as shepherd to God as the royal host. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. This is a stunning imagery. God becomes not just a shepherd, but a royal host, a king preparing a feast. Sign me up. I love that. In ancient culture, once a host welcomed you to their table, your enemies could not touch you. You were under their protection. So picture this. The enemies are at the door, but you eat in perfect peace because God lavishes on you like a generous host. Then it says, you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Oil was a sign of joy, honor, and being chosen. And the overflowing cup represented abundance. So not just that I lack nothing, but really I have more than enough. God doesn't just give us enough to survive a valley, He gives us enough to overflow. And then we read, surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Now the Hebrew meaning is stronger. Goodness will chase me. Mercy will pursue me. God's goodness, it doesn't lag behind. It actually runs after us. That's why I love the song in the bridge, Goodness of God, because it says your goodness is running after me. His goodness literally chases us. What other God runs after their followers like that? And then finally it says, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Forever. This is eternal hope. This is belonging. This is safety forever. And the table is an open invitation. For many of us, there's probably been moments in our lives where we felt like we didn't belong at the table. Maybe our ethnicity or our background made us feel like an outsider. Maybe our gender or our role or even our story has made us feel overlooked. There might have been times where we were told, whether directly or indirectly, that we weren't qualified enough or spiritual enough or educated enough or old enough or young enough or anything enough. And some of us have felt disqualified because of our past or maybe our mistakes. And maybe even because of what other people have done to us. But just because life has been heavy doesn't mean that we can assume that the table isn't for us. Psalm 23 reminds us that none of those things remove our invitation. The shepherd prepares a table for us, for you, for me, and not the polished version of you, not the filtered best version of you, the real you. You are welcomed and you are safe at his table. So a few years ago, I started getting a pain in my tooth. If any of you have ever had tooth pain before, you can understand that it's not fun. And it would come and it would go and it'd come and it'd go. And I'm not like a huge fan of the dentist. So every time it would go, I'd be like, oh, that's fine. It's gone. And then it got to a point where it was so painful that I was finally like, I got to go see a dentist. And I did have people around me that are like, just go to the dentist. And then I went and they said to me, you have a hole in your tooth. That's what's causing the pain. And when food gets in there, it gets infected and, things like that. But then the dentist said something to me that I just kind of saw as a bit of a life lesson. She said, if you had have come when you first felt pain, it would have just been a filling that you needed. But because you waited so long and it got more infected, you need a root canal now. When you ignore pain and it gets worse, when you manage the pain instead of treating it, when you numb it instead of healing it, the valley, it works the same. Burnout works the same. Our souls, they work the same. Don't wait until the pain is unbearable before you let God lead you to these green pastures again. So sometimes we can't always take a holiday when our soul needs time to recover. So maybe we need to incorporate some small rhythms, whether it's a breathing exercise, whether it's a slow morning awake. I was talking to a friend a little while ago and she was saying how she just couldn't necessarily wake up early every morning because of having young kids. And I totally understood that. And so I suggested, which is what I suggest to you now, that maybe just have one morning a week, that's your morning where it's a slower morning. Maybe it's an earlier morning. It's a morning where you can just know that that morning is coming, where you can set aside some time to read, to meditate, to walk, to pray, to do whatever you need to do to give your soul a reset rhythm. Maybe you can incorporate the rhythm of listening to worship music when you go for a walk. Maybe this month you need to let go of something. A rest doesn't have to be dramatic to be powerful. And as we move into 2026, before January even arrives, there might be some questions that you want to reflect on. What do I want to carry into 2026? What do I need to leave behind from this year? What rhythms are going to strengthen me and not drain me in the new year? Where is God leading me to lie down? Where is He restoring my soul? 2026 doesn't need a new version of you. It needs a rested, restored, and very much a shepherded version of you. Wherever you're listening from, maybe it's a place of exhaustion, or maybe it's a place of being hopeful and ready. I pray that Psalm 23 settles deep into your spirit. I pray that your soul is restored. I pray that you walk through your valley with confidence, fearing no evil, because you know who is walking with you. I pray you feel the shepherd beside you. I pray His goodness chases you into the new year. And I want to thank you so much for being here with me this year. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing and journeying with us through this Soul Strong podcast. And we're just getting started, and I can't wait to keep doing more deep dives with you into the Word of God, into His values as we live that out in 2026.
I am, you are, we are so strong.